Morning guys, Mark Ferrasci, ProTech Dog Trainer. I figured I'd have a little bit of a yak session in regards to the dopamine box and what we're doing with it. I've got another video going up this morning. I already posted one with Big Boy, and I'm going to post another one with the Shepherd, Bruno, and show you what I'm working on so that you start to be able to add up the pieces and maybe you can use the tool yourself for different things. The one thing I want you to realize that I'm talking about right now is something that's a very deep-rooted, instinctive aspect of the dog. Okay, and there are many. Okay, very things that are very deep to the deep wiring of an animal that we kind of just take for granted. We don't really even realize it's there, and we're not as, they're my big words again, cognizant and aware of, right? So it's important to understand that that's where all of it comes from. When I have customers come to me, it's their ignorance that have caused the problem. A lot of times it's because of classical conditioning or something they're doing in their environment. They've created it. It all comes from the owner setting up their pattern and routine and how they interact with the animal and their relationship with the dog, right? So a lot of the things that you see me working with right now are talking about are in that whole realm of deep-seated wiring. That seeking behavior is one of the most strongest behaviors in a dog. To search, to seek out their nose is just prevalent, very deep, right? So the dopamine is another thing that we're aware of, that hormonal aspect of the chemical in the brain that gets the dog all excited and starts to have that dopamine release, right? Now for years, we always thought that it was when we gave the dog the food and the reward was there, that was where that crescendo of that dopamine release was at, when they got the food. In reality, it's not. It actually happens before. It's the anticipatory want, going back to classical conditioning, and that anticipation of what's going to happen next is where that bubbles up and releases that dopamine into that euphoric attitude that we want in the dog to get what we're after in the training, right? So when we're saying no, good, and yes, and we're saying yes, we're creating a dopamine release in that dog's head, right? Yes, right into the food. Yes, right into the food, right? So it's there in our training and our aspect of interacting and being aware of the psychological makeup of a dog and these deep-rooted things. Now that's something that Bart Balone with Nipopo has brought to the surface, because he has created tools that are all related to these things that are very deep-rooted. And one of these tools is, and you got to give him credit for it, the flex pole, right? He came up with a flex pole. He brought it to market. He was the only one you could get it from for a long time, and then all of a sudden the other manufacturing companies and stuff put it together, and they start and you can see other models of it out there now in the flex pole. And what is a flex pole? Basically a bendy pole that has a post in it that has a nail basically underneath the platform that you can push into the ground that'll keep that item stable standing up, a flex pole. And it's bent like this, and it has a little string on it that basically allows it to flex and give the dog opposition reflex. The dog's always got tension on the neck depending on how you use it, right? Opposition reflex is what you're playing with as far as that deep-rooted instinctive behavior. We're talking about some of these things that are all over the place. There's a bunch of them that are in the dog's psychological makeup. One of those is opposition reflex. If you pull back on the dog, he wants to pull forward. And all animals have it. Even us have opposition reflex. You see it being used in martial arts, where you will push into the person, and now they're going to want to push back. And as they push back, you go with it, and you flip them on their ass, right? I used to do jiu-jitsu. Taekwondo, jiu-jitsu was my art as a kid in junior high and high school. So I'm familiar with some of these things. But that opposition reflex is true with all animals, and some more than others, right? Even within their own breed. In other words, dogs, some dogs have more opposition reflex than others. Get yourself a Malamute or a Husky or things like that. Put a harness on them, see how much they want to pull, right? It's been bred into the dog to fulfill a purpose for pulling that sled, right? So we use that in our breeding program. What we brought out in these animals, we have actually genetically brought these things out in the animal to make them more tenacious and more into whatever we're dealing with what we want out of the animal in that thing. A ratting dog is an example. The little terriers that are so into the varmints and going after that. Something we bred into the dog, and that's a genetic ingrained thing, right? So that deep-seated wiring is what we're talking about in a myriad of different areas, right? So Bart was smart enough to realize some of these things, and he's created some tools that he could use, and he's brought them to the market, and he's put it into his Nipopo school and all that. But these accent points that he's bringing out are things that are been with us for thousands of years, okay? There's nothing new about anything that Justin Rigney's doing with that fence, that he's working that fence and doing it and saying yes and giving the dog a bite and using territorial or boundary protection in the animal that's very natural and instinctive and very deep-rooted in the animal, right? So that's what we're talking about, some of these things. So you see me working with a dopamine box, right? The dopamine box is basically using that seeking nature of the dog wanting to seek out something, and it creates a tunnel, almost like blinders on the horse, right? And then it creates this whole emphasis going forward is what I'm using it for. I'm using pressure on, pressure off. Now, there's probably a myriad of things that you can do with it in teaching the dog to focus, bring out some of the stuff for seeking, for search and rescue, or for finding dopes, drugs, bomb dogs. All that stuff can benefit from something like the dopamine box, because you're going to get some instinctive behaviors that are going to be set in with your conditioning program. They're going to be able to dovetail into what you're doing when you're practical application of either competing in sport or doing it for real or whatever it may be. You're enhancing this deep-rooted instinct in the dog. With the dopamine box, it's about focus. The dog's intensity is going to be, and then the dopamine release and how you can use it. Again, a myriad of things you can use it for. When the Flex Pole first came out, it was Bart Ballone talking in a couple seminars that he did, talking about how he uses it with a handler going on the outside, and then all of a sudden you started seeing people going, ding, and they started using it for more practical applications and more things that they could do, using creativity, imagination, and creativity into what they were trying to accomplish with the dog, using that tool. Flex pole, dopamine box, opposition reflex, territorial or boundary protection using a fence line. We've been doing it forever. Justin didn't come out with something that's I'm a genius and I created this. This is something that's instinctive in the dog, and we've been using it for hundreds of years. Well, I've been using it for 30 or 40 in my applications, using it, decoying a dog on the fence line, right? All that stuff, we've been doing it forever. All they did was formulate it into a practical application and pattern and routine that gives them what they need and what they're trying to give to the dog for the training purposes, right? So you can get very creative with some of these things. You can start thinking about stuff that you can do. Maybe you have a problem with a dog, you want to start using it. With that shepherd as an example, he is really wound up and he's got too much wind behind the sails when he goes onto the field, which is common with me because I spend so much time getting the dog to be fundamentals, biting where he's going to bite, driving forward and biting hard, that crunch bite that you hear me talking about all the time. All these things and I want the dog to really have a good foundation of that before I start going after control. So what I'm trying to do now is basically mesh and create something that I can use off to the side and be able to dovetail into that and get what I want to out on the field, as far as not paying attention to that, not winding up so much that I have no control of them. For years, what did we do to do that? Crank the dog, beat the shit out of them. It could be a year or two and I'm yanking the dog and I'm getting nowhere because the dog's so intense and so, right? So when we do this and we do something off to the side like the dopamine box, now I'll have a tool and I'll be able to mesh it and bring it together, right? That's my goal anyway with the shepherd. With the Dutchie, the puppy, big boy, I'm basically trying to use it as a development tool starting from when he's young and bring it into his whole repertoire of how we use it, and I want him going forward, pushing forward, which I'll want with a shepherd too. But with the Dutch shepherd right now, with that puppy, I'm thinking about where that dog's going to go as far as him learning. Pressure on means go forward, right? So, and we get into decoy work and everything, that's the same thing we're going to be using. We're going to be putting pressure on the dog comes forward and we kind of give to it and we let the dog win, and we keep doing that in a myriad of different places, right? So I'm not a decoy, but at the same time I understand what's going on around me. So that's what we're doing with this tool. That's what I want you to understand, is how deep-seated, rooted these instincts are in the dog, and we're playing on these instincts that are very deep-rooted, and we're using tools and conditioning patterns and routines that we can condition the dog so we can take it and use it in myriad of different things and use it in the areas we want to accent and increase the quality of the dog in the work, right? That's why we're using it, right? All right, I'll let you guys go. Mark Ferrasci, Protect Dog Training, talking about tools how we use it, and the deep-rooted instincts of a dog, and how deep-rooted some of these things are that we can use to our benefit. It's just being smarter than the dog. I'll give you a good example of that little saying. I've been saying it for years. You got to be smarter than the dog. Same thing with any animal. You got to be smarter than that animal, because they'll put you down. Used to be out with the ex-girlfriend. She'd have a dog that would be running away from her. She couldn't get it to come back. She'd get all frustrated and mad, start chasing this dog everywhere. And I always kind of stopped and say, hey, you got to be smarter than the dog. Don't do that. I'd take a ball and start bouncing it, and then run the other way, get him excited, and get him to chase me, and boom, all of a sudden I've got the dog, right? You got to be smarter than the dog. So that's what we're doing. We're using tools that we can enhance what we're using, and trying to give that aspect of we've got to be smarter than the dog, to condition the animal to get his head to go in the right places, to get his emotional states of mind and his drive states where we want them. We've got to understand these things, right? All right, let you guys go. Mark Ferrasci, Protect Dog Training, yakking at the screen as always, talking about tools, conditioning, and deep-seated instincts in the dog that we can use to our benefit. I'll talk to you later.